A rich doctor marries a black woman, and all the white women in the town are mad that he married an outsider instead of one of them. Naomi Bennett leaned against the window of the car, her eyes tracing the curve of the road as it wound its way through Clearwater Cove. The town was just as Henry had described, quaint, with its Victorian houses standing proudly along narrow streets lined with towering oak trees. As they passed by, she noticed the looks. Some were curious, others dismissive, but most carried a weight she knew all too well. It wasn't outright hostility. It was something more subtle, something that came from living in a town where everyone knew each other's business and social status was everything. Naomi had encountered it before, in different forms, in different places, but this time it was different. This time she was the newcomer, the outsider, the one who had dared to disrupt the unspoken order. Henry's hand slipped over hers, squeezing gently. "You okay?" Naomi smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just taking it all in." Henry nodded, his expression softening. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he had promised her a new start, a place where they could build something together, away from the memories of loss that had plagued her since her mother's passing. Clearwater Cove was supposed to be that place. The car pulled to a stop in front of a small cafe, its sign swinging gently in the breeze. "How about we grab a quick bite before we head home?" Henry suggested, already reaching for the door handle. Naomi hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Sure, why not?" The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The cafe was charming, with mismatched chairs and wooden tables, the walls adorned with photographs of the town's history. It was the kind of place that made you feel like you had stepped back in time. Behind the counter stood a woman with gray hair pinned neatly into a bun, her sharp eyes watching them as they approached. She wore a polite smile, but there was something in her gaze that made Naomi's skin prickle. "Morning," Henry greeted, his tone friendly. "2 coffees, please." "Of course," the woman replied, her voice warm but measured. "You must be Dr. Whitmore. I've heard so much about you." Her eyes flicked to Naomi, the smile tightening slightly. "And this must be your wife?" Naomi extended her hand, offering a smile. "Naomi Bennett, it's nice to meet you." The woman took her hand briefly, her grip firm. "Miriam Cartwright, welcome to Clearwater Cove, Ms. Bennett." Her eyes lingered on Naomi's face, taking in her features with an assessing gaze that was far from subtle. "Thank you," Naomi replied, pulling her hand back and maintaining her composure. Miriam turned her attention to the coffee machine. The conversation momentarily halted by the hiss of steam and the clatter of cups. When she spoke again, her tone was casual, but Naomi could sense the curiosity behind it. "So how are you finding our little town? Must be quite different from where you're from." "It's beautiful," Naomi said, choosing her words carefully. "Peaceful," Miriam smiled, a little too knowingly. "Yes, we like to keep it that way. Not much changes around here. People value tradition, you know. Familiar faces, familiar places. It's what makes Clearwater Cove so special." Naomi met Miriam's gaze, her smile unwavering. "I can see that. It's nice to be somewhere that values community." Miriam set the cups of coffee on the counter, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm sure you'll find your place here eventually. It can take a while for newcomers to settle in, but I'm sure Dr. Whitmore will help with that." "Of course," Henry interjected, sensing the underlying tension. "Naomi's already making plans to get involved in the community. I'm sure she'll fit right in." Miriam's smile returned, but it was colder this time. "Well, I'm sure everyone will be watching to see how that goes." As they left the cafe, coffee in hand, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Miriam's words carried a warning. The town's beauty, its charm, it all felt like a veneer, something thin and fragile that could easily crack under the weight of what lay beneath. "Are you sure about this, Henry?" Naomi asked quietly as they walked toward the car. Henry paused, turning to face her. "I am. This is our home now, Naomi, and whatever comes our way, we'll face it together." Naomi looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. She knew he meant every word, but she also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Clearwater Cove was a town that valued tradition, and she was anything but traditional in their eyes. As they drove away from the cafe, Naomi glanced back at the sign, now just a speck in the distance. She was here now, in a town where everyone knew each other's business, where the ocean breeze carried secrets and gossip, and she would find her place, no matter what it took. The sound of the ocean was the only witness as Naomi stood on the sandy beach, her hand clasped tightly around Henry's. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the water, turning the waves into shimmering ribbons that lapped gently at the shore. It was a small ceremony, just the way they had wanted, intimate, simple, and focused on what truly mattered, their love for each other. Naomi's dress was elegant but understated, a soft ivory that complemented her rich brown skin. Her hair was pulled back in a simple twist, adorned with delicate flowers that Henry had picked himself from the garden that morning. There were no grand displays, no lavish decorations, just the two of them, standing side by side, ready to start their life together. The officiant, a kindly older man with a deep voice, spoke the vows with a reverence that matched the occasion. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest as she repeated the words, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I, Naomi Bennett, take you, Henry Whitmore, to be my lawfully wedded husband. Henry's eyes never left hers as he spoke his vows, his voice firm and filled with conviction. I, Henry Whitmore, take you, Naomi Bennett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. As they exchanged rings, Naomi felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was right. This was what she had always wanted. A partnership built on love, respect, and trust. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. The kiss was soft, a gentle brush of lips that spoke of promises and a future they were ready to embrace. When they pulled apart, the officiant smiled warmly. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed down just for them. Naomi glanced around at the small gathering, Henry's parents, a few close friends, and the officiant. The absence of many townspeople was noticeable, but Naomi chose to focus on the faces that were there, the ones who truly supported them. After the ceremony, they gathered for a small reception in Henry's parents' garden. The air was filled with the scent of roses and freshly cut grass, the evening light casting long shadows across the lawn. A simple table was set up with food and drink, the atmosphere warm and relaxed. Naomi found herself standing alone for a moment, watching as Henry chatted with his father. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Evelyn Hastings approaching, a glass of champagne in hand. Evelyn was stunning, as always, with her perfect hair and impeccably tailored dress. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention wherever she went, and she knew it. Congratulations, Naomi, Evelyn said, her voice smooth as silk. It was a lovely ceremony. Thank you, Evelyn, Naomi replied, keeping her tone polite. She knew Evelyn's type, women who use charm as a weapon, who could wound with a smile and leave no trace of the blow. Evelyn took a sip of her champagne, her eyes glancing around the garden. It's a shame more people from the town couldn't be here, isn't it? But I suppose it's understandable, given, well, everything. Naomi's smile didn't falter. It's a small, intimate gathering, just the way we wanted it. Of course, Evelyn agreed, her tone light. But still, one would think that a man like Henry would have wanted to share this day with more of the community. After all, he's been such a staple in Clearwater Cove. Henry's the one who chose the guest list, Naomi replied, her voice steady. We both agreed that it was important to keep it small, with only those who truly care about us. Evelyn's smile tightened just a fraction, but it was enough for Naomi to see. Well, I suppose that makes sense. After all, it's not every day that a man like Henry marries a woman like you. Naomi met Evelyn's gaze, her expression calm. No, it isn't. The tension between them was palpable. But before it could escalate, Henry joined them, placing a hand on Naomi's back. Evelyn, I see you've met my beautiful bride, he said warmly, oblivious to the undercurrents of the conversation. Yes, we were just chatting, Evelyn replied, her tone shifting to something more pleasant. I was telling Naomi how lovely the ceremony was. I'm glad you could be here, Henry said, his smile genuine. It means a lot to both of us. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Naomi for a brief moment before she returned Henry's smile. Of course, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. As Evelyn walked away, Naomi felt the tension leave her shoulders. Henry noticed and gave her a concerned look. Are you okay? Naomi nodded, slipping her hand into his. I'm fine, Henry. Just adjusting. Henry squeezed her hand gently. I know it's not easy, but we'll get through this together, okay? Naomi smiled up at him, feeling the warmth of his love wrap around her like a comforting blanket. I know, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and quiet moments shared between the newlyweds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Naomi and Henry stood at the edge of the garden, watching the waves crash against the shore in the distance. "This is the beginning of our life together," Henry said softly, his arm wrapped around Naomi's waist. Naomi leaned into him, her heart swelling with love and hope. "Yes, it is, and I'm ready for whatever comes next." But as they stood there, a soft breeze rustling through the trees, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that this peace was fragile, that the waves of the ocean were carrying whispers of something darker, something that would challenge the strength of their bond. The absence of so many from the town, the look in Evelyn's eyes, these were just the first signs of the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. And yet, as she looked up at Henry, she knew they would face it together, no matter what. The morning light streamed through the curtains of the master bedroom, casting a warm glow over the room as Naomi stirred awake. The soft linens rustled as she turned, reaching out to find the space beside her empty. Henry was already up, likely preparing for his morning rounds at the hospital. She sat up, the events of the previous day flooding her mind. The wedding had been perfect in its simplicity, yet the interaction with Evelyn had left a bitter taste. There was no mistaking the thinly veiled resentment in Evelyn's words, nor the unspoken tension that had hung in the air. Naomi knew that she was not welcome in the eyes of many in Clearwater Cove, and that Evelyn was not just any woman. She was a queen bee, the kind of woman who dictated social norms and expectations. With a sigh, Naomi pushed the thoughts aside and prepared for the day. She had always prided herself on her ability to adapt, to face challenges head-on without letting them consume her. Clearwater Cove would be no different. Today, she would explore the town on her own terms and start to carve out a place for herself. Downstairs, she found Henry in the kitchen, dressed in his crisp white shirt and tie, sipping coffee as he skimmed through his patient notes. He looked up as she entered, a smile spreading across his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, setting down his mug to wrap an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "Good morning, dear Whitmore," she replied, her voice light with affection as she leaned into his embrace. "You're up early." "Always am," he said with a shrug. "I didn't want to wake you. Yesterday was a big day." Naomi nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of his collar. "I thought I might explore the town a bit today, get a feel for things." Henry's expression grew serious. "Are you sure you're ready for that? It might take some time for people to adjust." Naomi smiled, her resolve firm. "I can handle it. I don't want to hide away, Henry. The sooner I get out there, the sooner people will get used to seeing me." He searched her eyes for a moment before nodding. "I know you can handle it. Just be careful. Some people aren't as friendly as they seem." "I've noticed," Naomi replied, thinking back to Evelyn's thinly veiled hostility. After Henry left for work, Naomi finished her coffee and set out for her walk. She dressed casually in a light sundress and comfortable sandals, hoping to blend in as much as possible. As she stepped outside, the town greeted her with a cool breeze, carrying with it the scent of salt water and blooming flowers. Clearwater Cove was undeniably beautiful, with its charming houses and well-kept gardens. But as she walked through the streets, Naomi felt the weight of eyes on her, the curious, judgmental gazes of the townspeople. Some offered polite nods, others ignored her entirely, but most just stared, their expressions unreadable. She made her way to the local grocery store, a small family-owned shop that Henry had mentioned was a staple in the community. As she pushed open the door, the bell above jingled, announcing her arrival. The store was quaint, with wooden shelves stocked with fresh produce, homemade jams, and other essentials. Naomi wandered through the aisles, picking up a few items for dinner, when she overheard a conversation at the checkout counter. Two women stood there, chatting in hushed tones as they glanced her way. "Did you see her? That's Dr. Whitmore's new wife," one of them whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I heard she's not from around here," the other replied, her tone laced with disapproval. "Can't imagine what he was thinking, bringing someone like her into our town." Naomi's grip tightened on the basket she was holding, her knuckles whitening. She had expected this, had braced herself for the judgment and the whispers, but it still stung to hear it so plainly. As she approached the counter, the two women fell silent, their eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Naomi forced a smile as she placed her items on the counter, trying to keep her composure. "Good morning," she said politely, her voice steady. The cashier, a young woman with red hair and freckles, glanced at the two women before offering Naomi a hesitant smile. "Morning, is this everything for you?" "Yes, thank you," Naomi replied, handing over the money. As the cashier rang up her items, the two women exchanged a look, Then one of them, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, spoke up. "So you're Dr. Whitmore's new wife?" Naomi turned to her, meeting her gaze head on. "Yes, I am. Naomi Whitmore. It's nice to meet you." The woman's smile was tight, barely concealing her disdain. "I'm sure it is. You must find Clearwater Cove very different from where you're from." "I do," Naomi said, keeping her tone neutral. "But I'm looking forward to getting to know the town and the people here." "I'm sure you are," the woman replied, her voice cold. "But you'll find that some people here don't take kindly to outsiders, especially those who don't fit in." Naomi didn't flinch. She had faced prejudice before, had grown up learning how to navigate the unspoken barriers that others put in her way. But this was different. It wasn't just her race that set her apart. It was her very presence, her marriage to Henry, that threatened the town's sense of order. "I'm not here to disrupt anything," Naomi said calmly. "I'm here because I love Henry, and this is where we've chosen to build our life together." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing more. Instead, she turned to her companion, her expression hardening as she muttered something under her breath. Naomi caught the words "doesn't belong" and "never last" before they turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with the cashier. The young woman behind the counter gave Naomi an apologetic look as she handed over the bag. "I'm sorry about them. They can be difficult." Naomi took the bag with a grateful nod. "Thank you, I appreciate it." As she stepped outside, Naomi took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The morning had been a test, a glimpse of what she would face in this town, a mix of open hostility, quiet disapproval, and a few glimmers of kindness. It was a reminder that her journey in Clearwater Cove was just beginning, and it wouldn't be an easy one. But Naomi was not one to back down. She would not let the whispers, the stares, or the judgment of others dictate her life. She had faced adversity before and had come out stronger for it. This time would be no different. As she walked back home, her mind wandered to Henry, to the life they were building together. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, that the town's prejudice and envy would continue to test their relationship. But she also knew that their love was worth fighting for, and she was ready to fight. The days passed slowly in Clearwater Cove, each one marked by subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Naomi was beginning to learn the unspoken rules of the town, the way people moved in and out of each other's lives with a careful balance of courtesy and underlying tension. It was a place where everyone knew their place, and stepping outside the boundaries, whether by race, class, or simply by marrying the wrong person, was not easily forgiven. Naomi had started to find a rhythm to her days. She would take long walks in the morning, exploring different parts of the town, trying to familiarize herself with the streets, the shops, the people. She began volunteering at the local clinic, hoping to use her skills as a nurse to make a positive impact and, perhaps, earn some respect. Henry supported her fully, though she could sense his quiet worry whenever she ventured out alone. It was during one of these volunteer shifts that Naomi first encountered Miriam Cartwright. Miriam was a widow in her mid-50s, her sharp eyes and quick tongue making her a formidable presence in the town. She was a frequent visitor to the clinic, always with some new ailment or complaint that required attention. "Ah, Mrs. Whitmore," Miriam said as Naomi approached her in the waiting room. "I was wondering when I'd run into you here. Or should I say Miss Bennett? It's hard to keep track these days." "Mrs. Whitmore is fine," Naomi replied with a polite smile, guiding Miriam into one of the examination rooms. "What seems to be the problem today, Mrs. Cartwright?" "Oh, you know how it is," Miriam sighed dramatically, settling herself onto the examination table. "Just a little of this, a little of that. The doctors say it's nothing serious, but I like to keep on top of these things. You can never be too careful." Naomi nodded, taking Miriam's vitals and making small talk. She knew Miriam's type all too well. Women who thrived on gossip, who kept tabs on everyone in town, and had an opinion on everything. If there was anyone who could sway public sentiment in Clearwater Cove, it was Miriam. As Naomi checked Miriam's blood pressure, the older woman's gaze lingered on her. "So how are you finding our little town, Mrs. Whitmore? I imagine it's quite different from where you're from." "It is," Naomi agreed, keeping her tone light. "But I'm starting to get to know the place and the people," Miriam murmured, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And the people are getting to know you too. It's not every day that someone like you marries into a family like the Whitmores." Naomi paused, her hand stilling on Miriam's arm. "Someone like me?" "Oh, don't take it the wrong way, dear," Miriam said quickly, though her tone was anything but innocent. "It's just that Well, this town has its traditions, its ways. People here don't take kindly to change, and marrying outside certain circles, well, it raises a few eyebrows, that's all. Naomi finished checking Miriam's vitals and stepped back, meeting the woman's gaze. I understand that people might have their reservations, but Henry and I are happy, and we're here to stay. Miriam's smile was tight, her eyes glinting with something Naomi couldn't quite place. Of course you are, but just a word of advice, Mrs. Whitmore. You might want to be careful about who you trust around here. Not everyone is as welcoming as they might seem. Naomi didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to write down Miriam's information on her chart. She had learned long ago that there was power in silence, in letting others reveal themselves while she held her own counsel. As Miriam prepared to leave, she paused at the door, her hand lingering on the handle. You know, Evelyn Hastings is hosting one of her famous dinner parties this weekend. I'm sure you've heard about it. It's quite the event in our little town. A real test of who's who. Naomi looked up, surprised. She had heard murmurs about Evelyn's social gatherings, but no invitation had come. Not that she had expected one, given their frosty interaction at the wedding. Is that so? Naomi said, keeping her voice neutral. Oh yes, Miriam continued, her tone dripping with false sweetness. I wouldn't be surprised if you received an invitation soon. After all, it would be quite the statement if you were to attend, wouldn't it? I wonder how the other ladies would react. Naomi understood the underlying challenge in Miriam's words. An invitation to Evelyn's dinner party would be more than just a social courtesy. It would be a test, a way to see how Naomi handled herself in the lion's den of Clearwater Cove's elite. I suppose we'll see, Naomi replied calmly. Thank you for the information, Mrs. Cartwright. Miriam smiled, a satisfied gleam in her eyes. Of course, dear. Just remember what I said. Be careful who you trust. With that, Miriam left, leaving Naomi alone in the examination room. She took a deep breath, processing the conversation. Miriam had clearly been testing her, prodding for weaknesses, looking for cracks in her resolve. Naomi wasn't naive. She knew that any invitation from Evelyn would come with strings attached, that it would be an opportunity for the town's social elite to size her up, to judge whether she truly belonged. But Naomi was not one to back down from a challenge. If an invitation came, she would accept it, not because she sought approval, but because she refused to be intimidated. She had married Henry out of love, and she would stand by him no matter what the town thought. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, though Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that the winds were shifting, that something was brewing just beyond her sight. When she returned home that evening, she found Henry in his study, going over medical journals. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening. How was your day? He asked, setting aside his papers to give her his full attention. Interesting, Naomi replied, taking a seat beside him. She recounted her encounter with Miriam, her words careful as she described the conversation. Henry listened intently, his brow furrowing. Miriam's always been a troublemaker, he said after a moment. She loves to stir the pot, especially when she thinks she can get something out of it. I figured as much, Naomi said, leaning back in her chair. But she mentioned something about Evelyn's dinner party this weekend. Do you think she'll invite us? Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. Evelyn's been a thorn in my side for years. She'll invite us, but not out of kindness. It'll be her way of testing you, of seeing how you handle the pressure. Naomi nodded, her expression thoughtful. Then we'll go. If she wants to test me, let her. I'm not afraid of her or anyone else in this town. Henry reached out, taking her hand in his. I know you're not, and I'll be right there with you every step of the way. Naomi squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his support. She knew that the coming weekend would be a turning point, a moment when she would be thrust into the spotlight, forced to navigate the complex social currents of Clearwater Cove. But she was ready. As the evening wore on, they sat together in comfortable silence, the bond between them strengthening in the face of the challenges ahead. Naomi felt a deep sense of resolve settle within her. She had chosen this life, this man, and she would face whatever came with the same strength and dignity that had carried her through all the trials before. The first signs of resistance were beginning to show, but Naomi was determined to stand firm. This was her home now, and she would not be pushed aside. The town might be watching, waiting for her to falter, but Naomi was prepared to meet them head-on, with Henry by her side. The winds of change were blowing through Clearwater Cove, and Naomi was ready to face the storm. The morning of Evelyn Hastings' dinner party arrived with an air of anticipation that seemed to settle over Clearwater Cove like a heavy fog. Naomi awoke to the sound of seagulls crying outside the window, their calls mingling with the soft rustle of the ocean breeze. She lay in bed for a few moments, letting the reality of the day sink in. Henry had already left for the hospital, his morning routine unchanged by the looming social event. He had kissed her goodbye with a reassuring smile, reminding her once again that they were in this together. But now, alone in their quiet house, Naomi felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. She had not yet received an invitation from Evelyn, but the entire town was buzzing with talk of the party. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if Naomi would be included, and if she was, how she would respond. The unspoken challenge hung in the air, thick with the tension of unfulfilled expectations. Naomi rose and went through her morning routine, trying to push aside the gnawing sense of unease. She had faced far greater challenges in her life than a dinner party, but this was different. This was about more than just social acceptance. It was a test of her place in this community and of her resolve to carve out a life here despite the odds. As she sipped her coffee, the doorbell rang, jolting her out of her thoughts. Setting down her cup, Naomi walked to the front door, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She opened it to find a young woman standing on the porch, a polite smile on her face. She was dressed in a crisp, tailored uniform that marked her as one of Evelyn's servants. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said, her tone formal. "I've been asked to deliver this to you." She held out a small, cream-colored envelope, the paper thick and expensive, with Naomi's name written in elegant script on the front. Naomi took it, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface as she tried to maintain a neutral expression. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. The woman nodded and turned to leave, her task completed with efficiency. Naomi closed the door and stared at the envelope for a moment, the weight of it feeling oddly significant. She knew what it was, of course. The invitation to Evelyn's dinner party had finally arrived, just as Miriam had predicted. Taking a deep breath, Naomi carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper. The invitation was as formal and impersonal as she had expected, with every word chosen with meticulous care. It invited Mr. and Mrs. Henry Whitmore to attend a dinner party at the Hastings residence that evening, at 8 o'clock sharp. The tone was cordial, but Naomi could read between the lines. The real invitation was to step into the lion's den, to prove herself worthy of the Whitmore name. Naomi placed the invitation on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She had expected this, but now that the moment was here, it felt more daunting than she had anticipated. She knew what was at stake, not just her own reputation, but Henry's as well. This was more than just a dinner. It was a public display, a chance for the town to judge her, to determine if she truly belonged. But she had made her decision days ago. She would not be intimidated, and she would not back down. If Evelyn Hastings wanted to test her, then Naomi would meet that challenge head on, with her head held high. The hours leading up to the dinner seemed to stretch on endlessly. Naomi busied herself with small tasks around the house, trying to keep her mind off what was to come. She tidied the living room, rearranged the books on the shelves, and even spent some time in the garden, tending to the flowers that were just beginning to bloom. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. Naomi retreated to the bedroom where she had laid out her outfit for the evening. A simple, elegant dress in a deep shade of emerald green, chosen for its understated sophistication. She knew that the women of Clearwater Cove would be dressed to the nines, but Naomi wanted to make a statement that she was different, that she didn't need to rely on ostentation to make her presence known. As she dressed, Naomi caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She took a moment to study her reflection, her mind wandering to the many times she had stood in front of a mirror like this, preparing for some event where she knew she would be scrutinized. But this time was different. This time she wasn't just representing herself. She was representing her marriage, her new life, her place in this town. When she was ready, Naomi walked downstairs to find Henry waiting for her in the living room. He had changed into a sharp, tailored suit. His usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by a quiet determination. He looked up as she entered the room, and a smile spread across his face. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "Thank you," Naomi replied, returning the smile. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Henry chuckled softly, then stepped forward to take her hand. Are you sure you're ready for this? I am, Naomi said firmly, though she couldn't completely hide the slight tremor in her voice. We've faced worse together. We'll get through this too. He squeezed her hand gently. That's my girl. Together they left the house and walked to the car, the evening air cool against their skin. The drive to the Hastings residence was short, but it felt like an eternity as they both sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Naomi's mind raced with all the possible scenarios that could unfold that evening, but she forced herself to focus on the present, on the calm strength of Henry's hand holding hers. When they arrived, the Hastings estate was already bustling with the activity. Cars lined the driveway, and the grand house was lit up like a beacon against the darkening sky. Naomi could see the silhouettes of guests through the windows, mingling in the elegant rooms, their laughter and conversation floating out into the night. Henry parked the car, and they both took a moment to collect themselves before stepping out. As they approached the front door, it swung open to reveal Evelyn Hastings herself, standing there with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Henry, Naomi, Evelyn greeted them, her tone perfectly polite. I'm so glad you could make it. Please come in. Thank you for having us, Henry replied smoothly as they stepped inside. The foyer was grand and imposing, with high ceilings and marble floors that gleamed under the soft lighting. The house was everything Naomi had expected. Elegant, refined, and designed to impress. As they moved further into the house, Naomi could feel the eyes of the other guests turning towards them, the quiet murmurs of conversation that followed in their wake. Evelyn led them into the main parlor, where a large group of guests had gathered, sipping drinks and exchanging pleasantries. Naomi recognized some of the faces from around town, though many were strangers to her. As they entered, a hush fell over the room, and Naomi felt the weight of 100 gazes on her. Everyone, Evelyn said, her voice carrying just the right amount of authority, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Henry Whitmore. There was a moment of silence, then a chorus of polite greetings followed, though Naomi could sense the undercurrent of curiosity and judgment in the air. She smiled graciously, nodding to those who addressed her, while Henry made small talk with a few of the men who had gathered near the fireplace. Evelyn lingered close by, watching Naomi with a keen eye. You must let me introduce you to some of our friends, she said, taking Naomi by the arm and steering her towards a group of women who were huddled together near the far side of the room. Naomi recognized one of the women as Miriam Cartwright, who gave her a small, knowing smile as they approached. The other women were strangers to her, but their appraising glances told her all she needed to know. They were the town's elite, the women who held the real power in Clearwater Cove's social circles. Ladies, this is Naomi Whitmore, Evelyn said smoothly. I'm sure you've all been dying to meet her. The women murmured their greetings, each one sizing Naomi up with a practiced eye. There was a tension in the air, a sense of challenge that hung between them like a drawn sword. Naomi met each of their gazes with calm composure, refusing to be intimidated. So Naomi, one of the women, a tall blonde with a sharp smile, said, How are you finding Clearwater Cove? It must be quite a change from where you're from. It is, Naomi replied evenly, but I'm starting to feel at home here. Oh, that's wonderful, the blonde replied, though her tone was laced with condescension. I'm sure it's been an adjustment, moving to a town like this. It has its challenges, Naomi said, her smile never wavering. But Henry and I are very happy. Evelyn interjected with a laugh that sounded more like a purr. I'm sure you are. And how are you finding the social scene here? It must be so different from what you're used to. Naomi understood the game they were playing, testing her, probing for weaknesses, looking for any sign that she didn't belong. But she refused to give them the satisfaction. It is different, Naomi said calmly, but I've always enjoyed meeting new people and learning about new places. I'm looking forward to becoming more involved in the community. The women exchanged glances, their expressions carefully neutral. Miriam, who had been watching the exchange with amusement, finally spoke up. Well, I, for one, think it's refreshing to have someone new in town, Miriam said with a sly smile. It's been far too long since we've had any excitement around here. Naomi couldn't help but wonder what Miriam's true intentions were. Was she genuinely supportive? Or was she merely trying to stir the pot, as Henry had suggested? Either way, Naomi knew she had to stay on her guard. Before the conversation could continue, Evelyn announced that dinner was ready to be served, and the group moved towards the dining room. Naomi took a deep breath, steeling herself for the next phase of the evening. The real test was just beginning. The dining room was as grand as the rest of the house, with a long table set with fine china, crystal glasses, and silverware that gleamed under the chandelier's light. Naomi and Henry were seated near the head of the table. It was a strategic move, placing them under the most scrutiny. As the first course was served, the conversation flowed easily, though Naomi could sense the undercurrents of tension in every word. The topics were light: recent events in town, plans for the summer, gossip about people Naomi didn't know. But there was always an edge to the exchanges, a subtle testing of boundaries. Naomi played her part well, engaging in polite conversation, answering questions about her life and background with grace and poise. She knew that every word she said was being weighed and measured, that the people around this table were forming their opinions of her based on this single evening. As the meal progressed, Evelyn steered the conversation towards Naomi's marriage to Henry. "So, Naomi," she began, her tone casual but with a sharp edge, "I'm curious, how did you and Henry meet?" Naomi glanced at Henry, who gave her an encouraging nod. "We met in New York," she replied. "I was working as a nurse and Henry was in the city for a medical conference. We were introduced through mutual friends and we just clicked." "How romantic," another woman at the table remarked, though her tone suggested otherwise. "And what made you decide to move here to Clearwater Cove? It must have been quite a change for you." "It was," Naomi admitted, "but I wanted to be with Henry, and we both felt that this was the best place to build our life together." "Very admirable," Evelyn said, her smile tight. "But surely you must miss the excitement of the city, the hustle and bustle." "Clearwater Cove is so quiet by comparison." Naomi could feel the eyes of the other guests on her, waiting to see how she would respond. She chose her words carefully, knowing that this was a pivotal moment. "There are things I miss about the city," Naomi said slowly, "but I've come to appreciate the peace and tranquility of this place. Life here is different, yes, but it's also fulfilling in its own way. I've found that the true excitement in life comes from the people you surround yourself with, not just the place you live." There was a brief silence around the table, and Naomi wondered if she had said too much. But then Henry reached over and placed his hand over hers, a small gesture of support that gave her the strength to continue. "I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone better," Naomi added, her voice steady, "and to contributing to the community in any way I can." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention to the rest of the guests, shifting the conversation away from Naomi. But the tension in the room had not dissipated. It had merely shifted, taking on a new form. As the evening wore on, Naomi continued to navigate the subtle currents of conversation, aware of every glance, every word, every gesture. It was exhausting, but she remained composed, refusing to let the pressure get to her. She knew that this was a battle of wills, a test of endurance, and she was determined to emerge victorious. By the time dessert was served, Naomi could sense that the tide was beginning to turn. The initial wariness and skepticism in the room had softened slightly, replaced by a grudging respect. She had held her own, and though she knew she still had a long way to go, this was a start. When the dinner finally came to an end, Evelyn rose from her seat and announced that it was time for the guests to retire to the parlor for drinks and further conversation. Naomi and Henry followed the others, their hands still linked, a silent show of unity. As they entered the parlor, Evelyn approached them, her expression unreadable. "Naomi, Henry," she said, her tone neutral, "I hope you enjoyed the evening." "We did," Henry replied, his voice calm. "Thank you for having us." Evelyn's gaze lingered on Naomi for a moment longer, as if she were trying to decipher something hidden beneath the surface. Then with a slight nod, she turned and moved away, leaving them alone. Naomi let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Well," she murmured to Henry, "I think that went about as well as it could have." "You were perfect," Henry said softly, squeezing her hand. "I'm so proud of you." Naomi smiled, feeling a surge of relief mixed with exhaustion. The evening had been a test, and while she couldn't say for certain how she had fared, she knew she had faced it with strength and dignity. As the night drew to a close, Naomi and Henry made their way back home, the tension of the evening slowly fading away. They had taken the first step toward carving out their place in Clearwater Cove, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, Naomi felt a renewed sense of determination. The battle was far from over, but tonight she had won a small victory, and that, she decided, was enough to keep her moving forward. The sun had barely risen over Clearwater Cove when Naomi awoke, her mind still reeling from the previous night's events. The quiet of the morning was a stark contrast to the high tension of Evelyn Hastings' dinner party. Despite the calm exterior of their home, Naomi felt an unsettling tension deep inside her, as if the cracks in her world were beginning to show. Henry had left early for the hospital, his day starting before the first light had touched the horizon. Naomi had hoped to use the quiet morning to regain her composure, but the weight of the evening before seemed to hang over her like a heavy cloud. As she brewed a pot of coffee, she tried to shake off the nagging sense of foreboding that had settled in her chest. The phone rang just as she was about to sit down with her coffee. The sudden noise startled her, and she almost dropped the cup in her hand. Wiping her hands on a towel, she hurried to answer. "Hello? Naomi, it's Evelyn Hastings," came the voice on the other end, cool and composed. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. "No, not at all. How can I help you?" "I'm calling to discuss something that happened last night," Evelyn said, her tone smooth but with an undertone of something Naomi couldn't quite place. "I'd like to meet with you. Are you free this morning?" Naomi hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She had hoped to avoid another confrontation with Evelyn, but she couldn't ignore the request. "Yes, I'm free. What time would you like to meet?" "How about 10 o'clock?" Evelyn suggested. "I'll come by your house." "All right," Naomi agreed. "See you then." As she hung up, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's visit was not going to be a pleasant one. The previous night's conversations had felt strained, and Naomi had sensed Evelyn's underlying hostility. She wondered what new challenge Evelyn might be bringing to her doorstep. The hours dragged as Naomi busied herself with household chores, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She cleaned the kitchen, tidied the living room, and even attempted to focus on a book she had been reading, but her mind kept drifting back to the upcoming meeting. By the time 10 o'clock arrived, Naomi was more than ready for Evelyn's visit. She had prepared herself mentally for whatever was to come, but she couldn't deny the nervous flutter in her stomach. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath and answered the door. Evelyn stood on the porch, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her expression as carefully neutral as ever. "Good morning, Naomi," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me." "Good morning, Evelyn," Naomi replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you," Evelyn said, her tone clipped. "I won't stay long." Naomi led Evelyn to the living room and gestured for her to sit. Evelyn settled into an armchair with a practiced grace, and Naomi took a seat across from her, trying to read her expression. "I wanted to talk to you about last night," Evelyn began, her voice calm but with an edge that suggested there was more beneath the surface. "It seems there were some misunderstandings." Naomi's curiosity was piqued. "Misunderstandings?" "Yes," Evelyn said, her smile turning into a smirk. "I heard some interesting comments about you after the party. Rumors, to be precise. It seems you've made quite an impression on the guests." Naomi frowned, unsure where this was going. "What kind of comments?" Evelyn's eyes glinted with something like satisfaction. "It's been suggested that you were less than gracious last night, that you were trying too hard to fit in. And of course, there are those who believe that your presence was a social experiment of sorts." Naomi's heart sank. She had hoped that the dinner party had been a step toward acceptance, but it seemed that Evelyn's machinations had only deepened the divide. "I didn't realize I was being scrutinized so closely. I was just trying to be myself." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her tone becoming more intense. "It's not just about being yourself, Naomi. It's about how you present yourself to others. And in a town like Clearwater Cove, appearances matter." Naomi's patience was wearing thin, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Are you saying that I need to change who I am to fit in here?" Evelyn's smile was thin, almost cruel. "I'm saying that it might be wise to be more aware of how you're perceived. People here have long memories and high expectations. It would be a shame if any unfortunate rumors were to spread." Naomi's blood boiled at the implication, but she kept her voice steady. "I see. Well, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll keep it in mind." Evelyn stood, clearly satisfied with the conversation. "I'm glad we could clear this up. I trust you'll take my advice to heart." As Evelyn made her way to the door, Naomi followed her, her mind racing. She had no intention of letting Evelyn's threats, or the rumors, affect her. If anything, this encounter had strengthened her resolve to fight back against the town's prejudice. "Thank you for coming by," Naomi said as she opened the door for Evelyn. "Have a good day." Evelyn gave her a final, almost pitying smile before stepping out and walking down the path to her car. Naomi watched her leave, feeling a mix of anger and determination. The game was far from over, and Evelyn's attempt to intimidate her had only fueled her resolve. After Evelyn left, Naomi took a moment to gather her thoughts. She knew that the coming days would be challenging, but she was determined not to let the whispers and rumors drive her away. Her focus now was on finding a way to confront the source of the town's hostility directly, to make a stand and ensure that she would not be silenced. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity as Naomi prepared for the next steps. She needed to rally support, to find allies who could stand with her against the tide of prejudice. But she also needed to be careful. Any misstep could give Evelyn and her allies more ammunition to use against her. As the sun set over Clearwater Cove, Naomi stood at the window of her home, looking out at the peaceful scene. The quiet of the evening was a stark contrast to the turmoil she felt inside, but as she watched the fading light, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced Evelyn's threats head-on, and she was ready to continue fighting for her place in this town. Henry would be home soon, and she was eager to discuss their next move. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, and they would do it with strength and dignity. Naomi turned away from the window, her resolve solidifying with each passing moment. The battle was far from over, but she was ready to face it with everything she had. The days following Evelyn Hastings' visit were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty for Naomi. The once tranquil Clearwater Cove seemed to have been enveloped in a cloud of whispers and sideways glances. Naomi's resolve was tested as she navigated through the growing hostility, trying to maintain her composure and find a way to address the mounting challenges. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Naomi decided to take a walk along the beach, hoping the sound of the waves and the salty breeze would offer some solace. The beach was relatively quiet, with only a few early risers taking in the morning calm. Naomi found a spot near the water's edge and sat down, pulling her coat tightly around her. As she watched the waves lap against the shore, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The peacefulness of the beach contrasted sharply with the turmoil she felt inside. She needed to find a way to regain control, to turn the tide of public opinion. But the path forward seemed unclear. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Miriam Cartwright walking towards her, a knowing smile on her face. Miriam had a reputation for being the town's unofficial historian and gossip monger, and Naomi had no doubt she was fully aware of the recent developments. "Good morning, Naomi," Miriam said cheerfully as she reached Naomi. "Fancy meeting you here." "Good morning, Miriam," Naomi replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Just taking a walk to clear my head." "I can understand that," Miriam said, taking a seat next to Naomi on the sand. "The beach has a way of putting things into perspective." Naomi nodded, appreciating the sentiment, but wary of Miriam's intentions. "Yes, it's quite peaceful." Miriam eyed Naomi with a glint of curiosity. "You know, Naomi, there's been quite a stir in town since your dinner with Evelyn. People are talking, though I'm sure you've noticed that." Naomi's gaze hardened slightly. "Yes, I've noticed. It seems that Evelyn is doing her best to make things difficult for me." Miriam chuckled, a sound that was both amused and slightly mocking. "Oh, Evelyn has her ways. She's always been good at stirring the pot. But I'm sure you're strong enough to handle it." Naomi was taken aback by Miriam's seemingly supportive words. "I appreciate that, but I'm beginning to wonder if there's anything I can do to change people's minds." Miriam's smile widened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, people do have long memories and strong opinions. It might be helpful to show them that you're not just here to disrupt the status quo, but to be a part of the community." Naomi frowned. "And how do you suggest I do that?" Miriam's gaze was shrewd. "Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. A community event, perhaps? Something where people can see you in a different light." Naomi considered this. A community event might indeed help bridge the gap, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. "Do you have any suggestions for what kind of event?" Miriam's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "Why don't you organize something that highlights your skills? Maybe a health fair or a workshop on wellness. It could be a great way to demonstrate your value to the community." Naomi nodded slowly, considering the idea. "That's not a bad suggestion. I'll think about it." Miriam rose from her seat, brushing off the sand from her dress. "Well, I'm sure you'll come up with something that works. And remember, Naomi, it's all about making a good impression." As Miriam walked away, Naomi felt a mix of unease and hope. She was wary of Miriam's intentions. She couldn't shake the feeling that the town's gossip queen had her own hidden agenda. But the idea of a community event was appealing. It could be a way to connect with the residents on a more personal level and show them that she was more than just the outsider they resented. When Naomi returned home, she began to draft plans for a health fair. She wanted it to be something beneficial for the community, something that would allow people to see her in a positive light. It would take a lot of effort and coordination, but Naomi was determined to make it work. That evening, Henry came home to find Naomi deep in thought, surrounded by papers and notes. He took one look at her and knew something was brewing. "What's going on?" Henry asked, his voice filled with concern and curiosity. Naomi looked up, her face a mixture of determination and exhaustion. "I'm planning a community event, something to help people see that I'm here to contribute, not just to be a target." Henry raised an eyebrow. "What kind of event?" "A health fair," Naomi explained. "I think it could be a good way to engage with the community and show them what I have to offer." Henry smiled, his expression full of pride. "That sounds like a fantastic idea. How can I help?" Naomi's heart warmed at his support. "I'll need help with organizing, of course, and we'll have to reach out to local businesses and healthcare professionals to get their involvement." Henry nodded. "Consider it done. We'll make this event a success." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as Naomi and Henry worked to organize the health fair. They contacted local businesses, set up partnerships with health professionals, and spread the word through flyers and social media. Naomi's efforts were met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, but she refused to let it deter her. As the day of the health fair approached, Naomi felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The event was a chance to make a real impact, to demonstrate her commitment to the community, but it was also a chance to face the town's skepticism head-on. The morning of the fair dawned bright and clear. Naomi arrived early to set up the booths and ensure everything was in place. Henry was by her side, helping with last-minute details and offering words of encouragement. The fair was held in the town square, a central location that would attract the attention of many residents. As the event began, Naomi saw a mix of familiar faces and new ones. People began to trickle in, curious about what the fair had to offer. Naomi moved from booth to booth, greeting visitors, answering questions, and offering health tips. Her presence was met with a cautious reception, but she could sense a growing interest, albeit. The turning point came when Naomi gave a brief presentation on wellness and preventive care. She spoke with passion and expertise, her confidence growing as she addressed the crowd. The audience listened attentively, and Naomi could see a shift in their attitudes. By the end of the day, the health fair had been a resounding success. Naomi had managed to connect with many of the town's residents, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The event had achieved its goal of showing that Naomi was a valuable member of the community, and it had provided her with a small but significant victory. As Naomi and Henry packed up the remaining materials, Naomi felt a sense of accomplishment. The event had been a success, but she knew there was still much work to be done. The battle for acceptance was far from over. But the health fair had been a step in the right direction. As they walked back to their car, Henry took Naomi's hand in his. "You did an amazing job today." Naomi smiled, feeling a surge of relief and pride. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your support." Henry pulled her close, giving her a reassuring hug. "We're in this together, Naomi, and we'll face whatever comes next with the same strength and determination." Naomi nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was ready to face it with the support of her loved ones and the determination to make a difference. The health fair had been a success, but it was just the beginning. Naomi knew that the real challenge lay ahead, in continuing to build bridges and overcome the obstacles that still stood in her way. But for now, she was content to savor the small victories and look forward to the future. The first signs of autumn had begun to touch Clearwater Cove, painting the trees in hues of gold and orange. The town seemed to have settled into a routine after the success of Naomi's health fair, but the calm was deceptive. Naomi could feel the tension in the air, and the whispers of discontent had not entirely disappeared. Henry had been working long hours at the hospital, and Naomi was spending her days focused on her job and maintaining their home. Despite the progress she had made with the health fair, the undercurrent of hostility remained, and Naomi knew that she had not yet fully earned the town's acceptance. One evening, as Naomi was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. She glanced at the clock. It was unusual for visitors to come by at this hour. Hesitant but determined, she wiped her hands on a towel and went to answer the door. To her surprise, Evelyn Hastings stood on the porch looking both determined and tense. Her usual composed demeanor was replaced by an expression that suggested she was about to make a serious declaration. "Good evening, Naomi," Evelyn said, her voice carrying an edge of formality. "May I come in?" Naomi's instincts told her that this visit was not just a social call. "Of course, please, come in." Evelyn stepped inside and Naomi led her to the living room. She gestured for Evelyn to sit and then took a seat opposite her, studying her closely. "What brings you here, Evelyn?" Naomi asked, trying to keep her tone even. Evelyn took a deep breath, clearly preparing herself for what she was about to say. "Naomi, I've come to discuss the current state of affairs in Clearwater Cove. I believe we need to address some misunderstandings between us." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Misunderstandings?" "Yes," Evelyn said, leaning forward slightly. "There have been ongoing tensions, and I think it's time we had a frank conversation. The town has been divided, and it's clear that the health fair, while well-intentioned, hasn't fully resolved the issues." Naomi felt a surge of frustration but kept her voice calm. "What issues are you referring to?" Evelyn's gaze was piercing. "The town's resistance to change. Your presence here has been a challenge for some people. They feel that your recent attempts to integrate are more of a statement than a genuine effort to be a part of the community." Naomi's jaw tightened. "I've been trying to contribute positively. I've made efforts to connect with people and show that I'm here to make a difference." Evelyn's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "I understand that, but actions speak louder than words. People need to see more than just a one-time event to change their views. There's a lot of history and sentiment that doesn't change overnight." Naomi nodded, feeling the weight of Evelyn's words. "So what do you suggest?" Evelyn took out a small envelope from her handbag and placed it on the coffee table. "I have been speaking with several influential members of the community, and we've come to an agreement. We believe that it might be beneficial for you to host another event, something more personal, that involves direct engagement with the town's residents." Naomi looked at the envelope, puzzled. "What kind of event?" Evelyn's eyes met Naomi's with a mixture of challenge and expectation. "A town hall meeting, an open forum where people can voice their concerns and where you can address them directly. It would show that you're willing to listen and engage with the community on a deeper level." Naomi considered the proposal. It was a significant step, and she knew it would require careful planning. "And if I agree to this, what happens next?" Evelyn's smile was almost imperceptible. "If the meeting goes well, it could pave the way for greater acceptance, but it's important to approach it with openness and transparency. It's a chance for you to prove your commitment." Naomi took a deep breath, weighing the pros and cons. Hosting a town hall meeting was a bold move, but it might be the key to bridging the gap between her and the community. "All right, I'll agree to host the meeting." Evelyn's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll help with the arrangements and make sure the right people are in attendance." Naomi nodded, feeling a mixture of apprehension and resolve. She knew that this meeting would be a critical moment, a chance to address the town's concerns and demonstrate her commitment to being a part of Clearwater Cove. Over the next few weeks, Naomi and Evelyn worked together to organize the town hall meeting. The process was fraught with tension and occasional passive-aggressive exchanges, but Naomi focused on preparing for the event and ensuring it would be a platform for honest dialogue. The day of the town hall arrived, and the town hall itself was packed with residents. Naomi arrived early to make sure everything was set up and to mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. Henry was by her side, offering support and encouragement. As the meeting began, Naomi took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to hear your concerns. I'm here because I want to be a part of this community and to contribute in any way I can." The audience was a mix of curious and skeptical faces. Naomi could see Evelyn in the front row, her expression unreadable. Naomi continued, sharing her vision for contributing to the town and addressing some of the issues that had been raised. As the meeting progressed, residents began to voice their concerns. Some were civil and constructive, while others were more confrontational. Naomi listened carefully, responding with patience and understanding. She addressed questions about her role in the community, her background, and her plans for future involvement. Despite the challenging questions and occasional hostility, Naomi remained composed. She spoke with sincerity and conviction, emphasizing her commitment to building positive relationships and contributing to the community's well-being. The meeting continued for several hours, and by the end, Naomi felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The feedback had been varied, but there was a noticeable shift in the tone of the room. Many residents seemed to appreciate her openness and willingness to engage directly. As the crowd began to disperse, Naomi and Henry stayed behind to clean up. Evelyn approached them, her expression thoughtful. "You handled that well, Naomi. It wasn't easy, but you faced it with grace." Naomi nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you. I hope this is a step towards greater understanding." Evelyn gave a small nod. "It's a start. Keep working at it, and you might just win over the rest of the town." Naomi watched as Evelyn walked away, feeling a cautious optimism. The town hall meeting had been a challenging experience, but it had also provided a valuable opportunity to connect with the community on a deeper level. As Naomi and Henry left the town hall, Naomi felt a renewed sense of determination. The journey to acceptance was far from over, but she was ready to continue working towards it with the same strength and resolve that had carried her through the challenges so far. The future was uncertain, but Naomi was confident that with perseverance and support, she could make a meaningful impact on Clearwater Cove and find her place in the community she had come to love.